This conference will now be recorded.
Consulting team, James Mathis. James is the Interim Lancaster County Economic Development Director. We have Chris Finn with us. Chris is the Director of Research and Marketing for the I-77 Alliance. We have Maceo Nance, who is a Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Commerce. And finally, I think most of you probably know Dennis Marstall, the Lancaster County Administrator. And so tonight, each of our panelists are going to speak for about 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes. I think Robin might cover a little bit more background information. Then each panelist is going to give us, from their perspective, talk about some of their key trends and issues and things that they're seeing. Then we'll have the time for questions and open it up to you all to ask questions as well. So hopefully we'll get all this done in a timely manner. I know everybody's probably thinking about the storm a little bit in the rain, but I think we'll have plenty of time to get through before that happens. So I am going to turn it over to Robin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So the whole topic for this evening is about business growth and about how to support with jobs the people who live here and who are going to live here. Because certainly this community is growing fast, and we have to make sure that they have something to do or they won't be able to come. So if you go to the next slide, the first thing that what I want to do is just to give you a very broad overview from an economic development standpoint about the statistics and the issues and the assets and the infrastructure that supports economic development. And then we're going to hear from the other panelists more specifically about the types of projects, things that are looking and the specific assets that you have that match or don't match, opportunities and limitations for the topic. So as you can see, and as you know, just as residents, this place has been growing like crazy. And Charlotte and Raleigh and Wilmington, where I live, are 3 of the fastest growing places in the country. And so because you're in the suburbs where the land is available, that makes you the target for sure. And so it's important for us doing a comprehensive plan with Benchmark to make sure that the land use is appropriated correctly so that both residences and commercial operations and industrial operations have a place to go long term. So that's really kind of the way we look at it. And as you can see, the population has increased about 55% in the last 20 years. That's unheard of, really, truly. And even 5% just from 2020 to 21. So obviously growth is an issue. The workforce is also increasing, as you can see. This list of existing businesses, I think what's really interesting about it is to see where the most number of jobs are, what sectors are they in. And in every community where we work, retail always is the #1 sector because we all have to buy things every day, food, groceries, and everything that we use in everyday life. Even though Amazon exists, retail is still, to some extent, is local. What's interesting here is that the #2 sector is healthcare and social assistance. That's fairly typical, but it's a little higher here than normal, but it's because you have a large hospital here, so that's the main reason. The third highest sector is manufacturing, and that's really great because that manufacturing jobs are what Mary and I, my business partner here, what we like to call the missing middle. And in today's world, especially in the larger cities, the workforce is becoming very extreme on the 2 ends of the spectrum. Folks at the very high end of the wage rate and the folks in the lower wage rate sectors, like food and accommodations and retail. So having that middle as much as you do makes your economy very diverse, which is a good thing. And of course, the fourth one is the professional technical, which is those high wage office jobs we like to call them. Next slide. This is just a list of the 20 largest employers in the community. And the data that we had, where we got this didn't tell us exactly how many were in each of these. We have other sources that don't exactly match, so forgive us for not giving you details. But the ones that I highlighted there are the ones that are the manufacturers, and the other ones are the either professional, technical, or like the healthcare places that we saw in that last chart. Next. One of the things that's really interesting about this county, because you are a suburb of the largest city in the state, is you've got a lot of corporate headquarters here. I mean, that's most unusual for a county, we'll say, this size. But considering that you are part of the Charlotte metropolitan area, that makes sense. I mean, Valentine really kind of got things started in this direction, and is so well known for so many corporate headquarters. Next one is the leading manufacturers. And it's interesting because your leading manufacturers, and officially the Haley Gold Mine is not a manufacturer, they're in the mining business, but they also do processing, so I guess that qualifies them in both directions. But as we saw before, you have over 3,000 employees in manufacturing, and these are all very significant companies. And then if you look at the list, they're in the old days, this was Textile World. It was forever Textile World. And you can see there's really only one company on this list now that's still in the textile business. It's fortunate that you still have one. Commuting patterns. Lots of people leave Lancaster to go somewhere else to work. That's not unusual for a suburban county. But the fact that you have almost 15,000 that also come in sort of attests to those corporate headquarters and those unique manufacturers that you have. Needless to say, Mecklenburg County is the #1 place where people come from and where people go to when they're commuting. York County is the second one, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Next. This is just a quick list of some of the assets that you have locally that support economic development growth. Obviously, the USC campus is a great place for workforce training, and certainly in itself has a number of folks who are employed there in that professional technical world. Hub zone means that there are small companies who can locate here and have differential treatment when they're in contracts with government entities, and a lot of the larger companies who need diverse suppliers. Rail service is always critical when it comes to manufacturing and also agriculture. And then the Lancaster Advanced Manufacturing Partnership is definitely an asset for some of those manufacturers that are here and for the ones that you have to bring in. Last but not least, this is just a real quick sort of lay of the land, if you will, for sites and buildings. If you don't have buildings, you don't have anything to sell. Think about it. How many people go to a tailor shop to get clothes? Nobody, hardly, these days. Everybody's going to a dress shop where you can look at it, try it on, see if it works, and then you buy it. And that's the way it is in our business. It's the exact same. Existing buildings are critical. And sadly, there's only one industrial building that's at least listed. And one of the things that these guys are going to talk about is, more specifically, all I did was to look at the official list from the Department of Commerce to see what is out there. And we all know in our business that there are a lot of things sometimes that are not always listed but want to be out there. But the fact that there are 17 sites is great. That's a nice number to have. And they're all different sizes in a large range. And there are 6 office spaces also in a fairly large range. So I think in terms of office and land, you're in good shape. In terms of industrial space, it looks a little different. So that's all I had to say. I will say, just not one of the slides, but just in looking at the data, it was, and you saw from that list of the top manufacturers, you have a very diverse set of manufacturers in a lot of different industries, which gives you the opportunity for these guys to sell to other manufacturers that are looking. We already have workforce in these areas. So food manufacturing, there are 18 companies. Textile products, there are 13 companies. chemical manufacturing, there's 15, fabricated metals, 28, machinery manufacturing, 21, computer electronic products, 10 companies, furniture, 12, and this lady is 35. So you've got and these are the whole list of all the manufacturers. Many of them are small suppliers, but at least you've got a very nice broad range and mix of opportunities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James and let him tell you a little more specifically what's going on in the county and how he views economic development, how it's happening.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. James Mathis, Economic Development Department. And just some thoughts, sort of free range of things that are going on that I see day to day, which you may find interesting. So currently, wonderful things. The county is very busy. The Economic Development Office is attracting opportunities. There are lots of businesses that would like to move in this region, as well as just the county. So that's a wonderful thing in our business. You always, you need that constant sort of opportunities to relocate companies, start new companies. So that the activity is outstanding. I will say that what can be a little frustrating is often the inventory just isn't available at some times. And there's many reasons for that. You can't solve it overnight, but you'll hear from Chris, who is one of our partners, where we will receive leads from national companies that are looking to be relocated. And it's one of the best sort of emails I get during my days is when you get a lead. And then it's very frustrating when somebody's looking for like an existing building that's 75,000 square feet, and they need this, and this. And you just don't have it. And so that quickly goes away. And again, you cannot solve this overnight. And I just wanted to share that with you. It happens often. So the activity is good. Not being able to supply what is needed can be frustrating. I will say that it seems lately, definitely the majority of people are looking for existing buildings as opposed to building their own. And I'm also seeing smaller type deals with people looking from 8 acres to 15 acres to relocate a business. They want to own land. They want to put their business there outside of sort of the Indian land area coming down toward Lancaster, and which is interesting. So we're seeing a lot of that, people paying rent somewhere in the North Panhandle up there and finding the land a little more affordable south, even down into the city of Lancaster. So lots of activity on that type of 8 to 15 acres of a piece of property. And we're seeing a lot of I'm going to call them, it's sort of a key man concept. There's one up in Indian Land that's done very well, where somebody built a long building and there's maybe 15 users. And it's probably 3,000 to 4,000 square feet of each building, little unit. And those are doing really, really well. And we've had other people actually petition the county to build more, which always tells me that somebody's doing that. They're pretty sure they're going to make money doing it. They've done some research and there's usually a demand. So that's an interesting concept. I personally think that goes along to what I will also talk about is the commercial office environment that we find ourselves in as a country, not just Lancaster. So, it is, I've been doing this a while. It is something I just cannot believe has happened. Even after the recession in 2008, and I was in Charlotte at that point, it went like this. But the return of people to the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I don't know. I'm not a betting man, but I don't. It is causing great pain. I can tell you that in the commercial real estate opportunities. We have a beautiful building at the Crossridge up there. It's 125,000, 3 stories. I took a tour the other day. They haven't given a tour in months, and not for the lack of trying, I can promise you. So I don't know if we can solve that, but it is an issue. So the commercial real estate is hurting. And I say that to also parallel why the ones that are the smaller units where people can go and sort of control the smaller footprint seem to be selling out and looking for more demand. The industrial parks, very, very attractive. Almost every inquiry we hear, they're interested if we have industrial parks that are county owned. Fortunately, we do, and they're doing well. We love them to be full. That's the plan. But just to share with you direct knowledge, it's attractive from anybody that's looking to relocate. One, they'd rather, I believe, deal with the county on land. There's some upside there, as well as it's usually built along somewhere like our aerial park, which is right on the rail and across from the airport. We toured some people and they just couldn't believe what a great location that was. It was ready to go. It's ready to be built. So that's, I see that as a very positive thing. Workforce issues, just to be 100% honest, almost 100% of the time I'm dealing with our businesses in Lancaster, workforce issue of some kind is an issue. I've visited a company recently that absolutely has the orders to do 120% volume, and they're at 80, and have been at 80 for 9 months. Even though they're hiring bonuses, signing people will quit. People, either can't pass a drug test or can't. There's just lots of things. We're not willing to work. That's also what I hear. So we can't solve that at all today, but it is, I promise you, it is an issue in economic development for the companies we're trying to bring here. And so that's, I don't know how long, but that's basically what's going on. Activity's great. We don't always have the most inventory. It's extremely attractive. We're also benefiting, by the way, from our neighbors. York, great job. Gastonia, everywhere, Cabarrus and Kannapolis and all of the areas around Charlotte are doing really, really, really well. I would suggest, as I talked to Robin about it, is how we grow in the future and what steps are taken. I know we're here to talk about economic development, but also I'm glad they're looking at residential and land use and transportation, and because it's coming. I mean, there's no question. 10, 20 years ago when I was in Charlotte, to be frank, I don't even know that I knew where Lancaster was really. I knew it was in South Carolina South, but it seemed like a million miles for back then, and it's just not. And so those are my thoughts on current economic state.
Thank you, James. And I will add one little comment here. I didn't talk about the unemployment statistics because they're low, because the labor participation rate is also low. But the one thing that he's talking about, workforce, is not unique to Lancaster County. This is an issue all over the country. Mary and I have done work in many states through the years, and we worked on projects where we were actually the site consultant looking for things, and I can tell you that it is, I agree, the busiest I've ever seen it in 45 years I've been in the business. Everywhere, I don't care what state you're in, it's busy, even the ones where the people are moving out, the industries are not. One of the reasons, and I should have said this from a bigger picture standpoint, not just about Lancaster, but we were working on a project from another county somewhere and did a lot of statistics on what kinds of things were moving. According to ThomasNet, which is sort of the industrial newsletter that everybody reads that covers everything, they have surveyed all of their North American manufacturers, and 83% of them are planning to reshore their supply chain in the next few years, which is why we're busy. But the workforce is a demographic issue everywhere. The birth rate went down in my generation. I was born at the top of the bell curve with baby boomers. And everybody, when I go to a meeting, everybody's either 60 or 30. You got it. Look at this right. And that's the same with the workforce. And that's one of the problems that, along with just sort of the cultural issues that James states. So you're not unique in that happening. We'll just have to figure out how to deal with it. So anyway, Chris is next. He's with I-77 Alliance, and he will talk about some of these same issues from a regional perspective. Thank you, Chris, for coming.
Sure. Yep, and thanks again. Thanks for the invitation to be here. What I'd like to do is just kind of take a step back and just explain kind of what this alliance that I represent, who we are and how we kind of fit into the ecosystem of economic development. And first I'll say that when we're talking about economic development, what we're talking about is business attraction. Larger scale projects, obviously there's local economic development. A lot of that's probably going to result from this comprehensive plan. But again, as far as our conversations go, we're talking about attracting large employers to the region. And in South Carolina, what the state has done in order to encourage public-private partnerships to assist with economic development is they've offered, there's a fund that's available, and if a county is within a regional alliance, then that regional alliance can claim some of that money as long as it's being matched by the private sector. So we are private sector investors. Because of that, we can leverage this money. And what that means is that every county in South Carolina is represented by one of 8 regional alliances. So the I-77 Alliance that I represent, we're one of the more newer organizations. And typically what you find, and this happens all around the country, is regional groups like ours, they might not be accountable to the geography that they represent. Everybody's trying to have their own best interest in mind. Regional groups that are working on projects, they may not necessarily bring in the counties, they may not necessarily communicate as well as they could. What happened was back in 2014, 4 counties, at the time 3 counties had come together and said, we know exactly what we want in regards to a regional alliance. We want to be able to take advantage of this money that's available. Let's create our own group. And what happened is that allowed us to silo off and have our kind of responsibilities and duties that don't overlap. And what that means for our group specifically is that we don't do project management, which is atypical for organizations like ours. All we are focused on is lead generation and marketing the region, and as a byproduct of that, Lancaster County when appropriate. So what we do is we travel all around the world. We work with the Department of Commerce. We hire private sector lead generation firms, and we're making phone calls and reaching out to companies directly. And we attend trade shows, we attend missions, we create our own missions, and what we try to do is generate about 100 opportunities a year. But again, since we don't do the project management, it's not the announcements that we're measured on. We just want to fill the pipeline for our counties so that, because we know that all of our counties, they are basically our project managers. They know the counties, they can sell the counties, we don't need to sell the counties. And it's a really good relationship because all 5 of the counties that are represented by our organization sit on our board, they're on our executive committee, they work together very well. And being a transplant from upstate New York, I can definitely say that it took me a long time to unlearn a lot of bad habits when I came down here because, again, everything was structured so well and how people work together, it's impressive. And when it comes to doing what we do, it's a value that not a lot of people can appreciate, but it's definitely makes our job a lot easier. So then specifically, just talk about Lancaster County. Lancaster County was the most recent addition to our organization. They were actually the only county that was not represented by a regional group. Back in 2016, they were able to participate with our organization. And I mean, since then, they've led all 5 of our counties, I want to say, a number of years on the number of announcements, on the number of jobs announced, and on the capital investment that's announced along with these projects. And really what we see is a division. The Panhandle has been office projects and corporate headquarters, and the middle and southern parts have been manufacturing. And the concentration of the industries that you have here, as Robin was mentioning, the diversity is great because it keeps you protected from fluctuations to specific markets. It affords you an opportunity to kind of weather recessions a little bit better than some other ones. And I was just looking on my phone at some of the data sources that we have, and just looking at the actual the sectors of your manufacturing that are the most present here are what we consider to be advanced materials, which is really an industry that a county wants to have represented as a good mix in their economy. So we're talking about chemicals, primarily from Nutramex and pharmaceuticals, but you also have fabricated metal products. If you look at the fastest growing industries, again, a lot of them align with these advanced materials. So Lancaster County is positioned extremely well. And the one thing that we really talk about a lot is the rapid growth that you've seen here. We're talking about being one of the top 15 fastest growing counties east of the Mississippi River. And when you're talking about Charlotte being one of the fastest growing cities, and that growth regions is led by York County and Lancaster County, fastest growing in the Charlotte metro area. And that gets to the point about workforce. Robin was saying that a workforce, it's an issue everywhere, it's an issue with every company that we deal with, and how we respond to that is to say, well, if it's going to be a problem everywhere, then you want to be where population is at least growing. And this is literally one of the best places you can be in the country if that's what's appealing to you. So, yes, you're going to have churn when it comes to your employment, but as long as that population base keeps growing, then those effects are kind of mitigated. I think that it'd be good to kind of leave it at that for now, just with that basic explanation. But we're happy to take some more questions later on. So I'm going to pass it over to Maceo Nance, who's one of our partners with the State Department of Commerce.
Real quick, let me just add one of the statistics I did talk about that we were talking about the 30-year-olds and the 60-year-olds, and you're talking about the workforce, is that in Lancaster County, the age sectors are pretty equal. You don't have that big gap in the middle as much as everybody else does, because as a suburb county, you get a lot of young families, because it's not central city. And so that definitely is an advantage, especially from a workforce point of view.
Question. What do these three numbers have in common? 188 million, 18,100,000, 4,497,000. Anybody want to take a guess? There are 188 million emails sent within 60 seconds just in the US. There are 18 million text messages sent or exchanged within a minute. There's 4.5 million Google searches per minute, just in the US. And you say, what does that have to do with economic development? Bottom line is, people know about you before they even think about coming to see what you have and what's here. They do their homework. They probably know more about Lancaster County than you do. They never ask, I won't say never, they seldom ask you a question that they don't already have the answer to see where you are. Okay? Slide first. We took a look at Lancaster. Lancaster's done really very well. These are from 2016 to present. Just under $400 million in announced capital investment, nearly 5,100 new jobs. Pretty good track record, I would say. Total number of projects, 28. What's really good about the 28 announced projects, they're split almost down the middle. 14 are new companies, 14 are companies that have expanded. Really good balance there. That's what you like to have. Next, please. This is the part that I thought was very interesting. Of those announcements, they've come from 9 different countries. And I bet people in this room didn't know that. But look at the countries that are represented just in Lancaster County now. And you ask, why is it that Lancaster is an attraction for international companies. It's not Lancaster. It's South Carolina is an attraction for international companies. We've got more international companies in South Carolina per capita, and again, depending upon who you listen to, than any other state in the country. And it varies. One year we'll lead, next year we'll be second. I don't think we've ever been any further down the list than fourth. And that says something. And the rationale behind that is simple. We started working the international marketplace in 1973. And it takes that much time to get enough confidence in what you're doing and have companies from foreign countries take stock in what you have to sell and what you promote. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about available buildings. We talked a little bit about sites. I thought that it would be a good idea to give you sort of a pictorial here as to where those properties lie. The red dots there represent basically the existing office buildings. You've got some great available space as it relates to the attraction of back office facilities, headquarters, that sort of thing. Really gorgeous properties. Problem, you only have one manufacturing facility, existing manufacturing facility available. It's a problem. It's not just a problem in Lancaster, it's a problem that we're now starting to face statewide. Why? They're all full. We've done a really good job of attracting companies here, and a lot of the better product that we have, product being land and buildings, is no longer on the market. So if there's a soft spot, that's a soft spot. 17 sites, 3 industrial parks. The industrial parks, I think, are doing fairly well. Problem is, they're relatively small. If you have a company that needs large acreage, you can't get them to fit there. The other 14 properties that you have available are all privately owned, which is really not a good thing for you, unless you have some type of, let's just say, unless you've taken care of your homework early and in met with the property owners, have either a first right of refusal or an option on the property for a specific price, you really don't know what you have. You can, trying to compete that way is very difficult. The property has no freestanding sites, which again is a soft spot. Properties that are under control by the county or owned by the county is always going to be the lead, take the lead position. Always. Any consultant that you work with or communicate with is going to tell you that. You just don't want to leave it in the hands of the private landholder. Whether it's a professional in that business or whether it's a local farmer, you just don't want to leave it in their hands to control your destiny. And very often we fall into that gap. Of those 14 that are privately owned, many of them are small. And when I say small, 2 acres here, 3 acres there, 5 acres over here. Obviously, they were anticipating. The anticipation there was for them to be office sites. You have 1 or 2 sites that are fairly large. I think there's one that's just under 1,400 acres. Is it the optimum site? I'm not so sure that that's going to be the case, but it's what you have. But you can see how it's spread out across the county. The industrial corridor in the county is obviously Highway 9. the key to successful economic development is fairly simple, and it's being ready. You have to be ready and you have to be prepared so these guys can do their job. If they don't have the tools to work with, and we're talking now the basic tools, available building space, available industrial sites, available water and wastewater, those are the key components as to what starts this process. I think James mentioned earlier that he had a call from several folks and they were looking for available building space. Depending upon the year, I would say that the Department of Commerce, from leads that we receive or requests that we get, generally runs anywhere from 75 to 85% of those inquiries are for existing building space. It's the way that they always start. Now, do they always end up in that position? No, not necessarily, but they always start there. And your key is, your hope is to be able to get these individuals to come into your community and see what you have to offer. If you can't get them to look, if you can't find a way to get them here, you got a problem. And what's getting them here now, and has been for the last several years, is available manufacturing industrial space. So if there's a weak spot, I think that's where the weak spot is. I do believe, and I strongly believe, in the fact that it has to all be planned. You want to be certain that your growth corridors and where you want to have your manufacturing entities locate can cohabitate with the existing surroundings. To have a manufacturing facility or an industrial park near a residential community is going to be problematic at some point. So if you can plan for it now is the time to start looking at how those things are spread out. There's enough space here for everybody. We just have to be sure that we do it in a conscientious manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Dennis, fill in some holes for us, things that we may not have said, or from your perspective as the administrator, what the county may or may not be doing to answer some of the questions that we had.
Great, I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
I want to first thank everyone for being here tonight. I will highlight that we have some elected officials with the Mayor Vinnie and school board member Robin Spinks. We also even have a planning commission member here with Ben Levine. I think it's important to understand that I think there's some other folks over here. Commissioner from Maine, right? Okay. But I think it's important to realize that we have all the parties together, because when you look at economic development, it does take the state, it does take the regional alliance and county, and I'll even say for the city of Lancaster. I've always believed that when you have a strong central or center city, the whole region grows. But people want to be a part of a vibrant region. They want to feel like they're in a hip place. But I really do think that filling in some of the gaps here is we have a story to tell in Lancaster that we've not been able to quite weave together yet. I'm working on it. But really, it's a story about going from Middletown to metropolitan, as it may be, where you take the strength of what this community's been in Middletown, where you do have the work ethic, you have the resourcefulness, but then we've added in now the tech, and we've added in the corporate headquarters. I really think that that is a good story to work on and to talk about. So I think it's important to have everyone together. And look at this comp plan, I think this is great. As you've learned about how we were looking at this, each 3 sections of the county are unique and distinct and different. Let's play those strengths across for business recruitment, for other recruitment and other purposes. But I really do think about the potential of partnerships that exist. Again, we would love to have a York Tech presence here again. I think that would be helpful for workforce development and for companies who want to know that they have a technological college that can help do the skills development for the workforce. If we don't have it, how can we train it? So I think that's important too. But think about some of the assets that we need as was mentioned earlier about the industrial land, a lot of this stuff can be very, I'll say, theoretical. If we don't have the assets that we need, if we don't have the industrial land, we're not even considered. If we don't have the buildings, we're not even considered. And so thinking about the role of the county as we go forward is really our role as infrastructure. That's where we've done, talk about land, we have the business parks. We've done a great job in the past. So I give predecessors before me a lot of credit for thinking about having these different area parks, Lancaster Business Park, thinking about industrial. But we've got to keep making those investments. Also, all this is a futile discussion if we don't address our water and sewer infrastructure. And so I take pride that the county has used $400,000 to help support the water and sewer expansion. Because if we don't have the water sewer capacity that the companies are looking for these days, they're clearly not going to locate here. And so thinking about how we can help and assist and grow, the city is applying for federal funds to optimize their wastewater treatment plant. I think that's important. We want to support that as the county. So I think the partnerships there are going to be crucial going forward. But I will say, I feel like we're resting on our laurels a little bit. Again, having some of these prior investments have served us well. But thinking to the future, and I'll say from the county perspective, I appreciate James has served as our interim economic development director. And we just announced that we have a new economic development director coming on, Brian Folk, from Richmond, Virginia. Some of his background will start on October 10th. The key thing about his background is he has a very strong international background. And as we're looking around, I think that's significantly important from what Maceo was saying. When we talk about the onshoring, the companies that are looking to come back here, that's going to be some of our manufacturing bread and butter going forward. So to understand that international game, I think, is important. So we also want to hit hard on the domestic market. But also, if you talk about infrastructure, schools, people care about schools. People want to know, locate here for a job. So again, I appreciate having the school board interested in this conversation. I think that brings it all kind of wrap around is where people can live today is anywhere. With the remote work we talked about, people aren't going back to different office spaces, and people are choosing their lifestyle and quality of life generally over where they want to locate for work. And so thinking about what is this community going to look like to be the place where people can work from home or have a small office, a 3,000 square foot office environment, or whatever it may be. So I really think from the county perspective, looking about the quality of life issues. And again, that's where I look for to work hand in hand with the city, all the towns around here, because it's important to us that we have the retail destinations. That we're not having people go to Rock Hill or up to Charlotte or whatever. Can we not have some of that destination retail around here? Because again, that builds on the whole quality of life. And again, the whole concept of placemaking. Do we have places where people want to go? I'll even say breweries and things like that for generations, but like that. It creates an overall environment that we need to think about from the city and county perspective about what is that quality of life looking like. And so when you get into the comp plan, talk about the growth and development, it is all very much interrelated. So I think that's an important thing for us to look at. From the council perspective, a lot of the work that the county council has kind of guided me is we think about work with the state in particular is incentives. Are there some things that we can do that sweeten the pot to encourage people to locate here versus locate in Mecklenburg County or York County or other places? From the state of South Carolina perspective, the incentive scheme is kind of known. You kind of know there's some formulas if you're bringing so many folks where you're, how many employees you're going to have, but think about the tax rates you can offer. So just really trying to think about how we can level that playing field a little bit more. But any net new business to our county is net new taxes. So the council sees, hey, if we want to give up a little bit of property tax money assessment, we're still ahead of the game because it's a new company that comes in town. But really, if you talk to any economic developer, where people are seeing most of their growth is from existing business. And clearly in Lancaster, what the work that Nutramax has done to expand now to, I think, their fourth location within the county is significant. How their investment in their job force and workforce has grown in the county has been tremendous. And so even thinking about, yes, it sounds great to get these corporate headquarters and other things here is very important. but also what can we do to grow our local companies? And that's why I'm excited that James is going to take on the new role for our business retention expansion when we bring on our new executive or economic development director, Brian. So really just thinking about from the county perspective, it is about what can we do for infrastructure, what can we do about incentives, and then how can we overall do the quality of life. And so I think that's a formula that most people know about, but the community that does it best is the one that wins. And so I think it's important for us to put our best foot forward, to really think about, are we serious about having the quality of life amenities that will attract companies? And it really is that have that diversity. I think we're a very good company that we do have a good diverse workforce in our community and job structure with the number and types of companies that we have. I think going forward, food and manufacturing is part of our bread and butter, and that builds our textile history. So again, trying to weave back in that story that we have to tell from Middletown to Metropolitan, I think will be important for people to see and understand as we go forward. So, kind of my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Really appreciate it. So Jason, do you want to start off with some questions, or do we want the audience to go first?
Sure, I'd like to have everybody give you a round of applause. Thank you for sharing all that information. I think it was really helpful to hear that. I think something that stood out to me is, each panelist, as you were describing, you were talking about the product. And, one building for this or whatever. So thinking about, future land use and thinking about the comprehensive plan for the county, what type of product should we be thinking about for planning, and should it be located in existing parks? Do we need to be thinking about new industrial parks that need to be established, buildings, what type of buildings? What are you hearing in your daily interactions with folks looking at Lancaster County and the region that you think would be beneficial, that we should be thinking about as we're developing the comprehensive plan?
I'll jump in real quick on that one. Is that we've had a conversation with the county council about, particularly in the Indian Land area, it's so residential that all the industrial land has basically been converted. And so there's not that much left. There's just some pockets, but what can we do as a county to help either foster another business park or to at least maintain that industrial land? Because that is kind of the 160 corridor. 521 is kind of the sweet spot for a connection to Charlotte, but also a connection to the workforce of the South. And so thinking about how can we also leverage from the county perspective to maintain some industrial zoning up there, encourage more industrial zoning, because that's land is a finite commodity. And once we let some of that go for residential, we'll never have that opportunity back to have jobs near housing. And again, we haven't talked about housing, workforce, and affordable housing, but how can we put those mixes together so we have commercial, retail, residential, and manufacturing jobs? So I think that's important. So one of the things that we're having ongoing conversations about, how could we consider a new business park or think about maintaining some more industrial land, particularly in the northern part of the county.
I'll throw into that. I think you have a really good peer to look at next door with Chester County. Chester County, they have 30% of all their jobs in the county are within manufacturing. It's actually the highest rate in the entire Charlotte region amongst all the counties. Chester County is the manufacturing powerhouse of the Charlotte region. And the reason why that is because 20, 30 years ago, county leaders knew that they were having the same conversation that we're having in this room. And what they did was they went ahead and you look at Highway 9 in Chester County, that's where the manufacturing is. And the reason why is because the county went ahead, rezoned so much land industrial. They went through basically shovel-ready certifications where they did all the due diligence, they got all the geotech reports, they got all the soil studies done, they had everything taken care of. And at one point, Chester County led South Carolina with the number of certified sites. And you see that as a result of that, they were able to have some of those large announcements, including Gallo, which is going to have a huge benefit to Lancaster County being right over the river. So you can look at them as an example of they had the foresight that they knew what they needed to do, and yes, there might not have been returns in the short run, but in the long run, they're definitely in a better position now. And again, talking about that industrial or that international attraction, Lancaster County is positioned perfectly with the proximity to Charlotte Douglas International Airport. And then again, if you're talking about workforce, you have a very large workforce within 45 minutes of your key economic zone. So, you're very appealing from that perspective. But again, as we are hammering home, you really need to have that product that's available because, these companies that are trying to mitigate risk, they want to maximize the return on their investment. And the sites that are prepared that there's going to be no concerns, they're not going to find anything, there's not going to be any tension in the rezoning. If all that's already taken care of, then that is going to be the most desired site.
If I may expand on that just a minute, let's take one step back. An open field that's 650 acres, let's just use numbers, okay, is not necessarily a good industrial site, regardless as to where it's located. I mean, period. It can be in the middle of nowhere, doesn't matter. It can be next to Indian land, doesn't matter. Just because it has 650 acres available for sale and the owner is willing to sell it at a really good price, it does not necessarily mean that it will be a good industrial site. Now, the question is why? Everybody thinks that the economic development process is very simple. It is not a simple process, even when it comes down to property. There are all kinds of tests that have to be run on the property from the geotechnical standpoint to the environmental standpoint. Now, even now for endangered species, earthquake zones. How many earthquakes have been in South Carolina this year alone? People read about these things, and we don't look at them as being a threat to us, but folks in other states read it and they have a tendency to panic. But these are tests that you have to run. The type of soils that are there, is it the type of soil that you can build something on? These are all background things that have to be done before you can even consider the purchase of the property and what the price is going to be. Because if you don't know what's underneath all of that dirt, and we ran into a problem at one site that had nothing but granite under it, it's a problem. Is it a good site? No. So every test and every process that you have to go through to make the determination as to whether or not a piece of property is worth purchasing costs money, because there are engineers involved at every step. So it's not just saying we're going to make this our industrial sector and let's go over here and we'll just put all of our industrial growth we're going to put right here. It's not quite that simple. It's a struggle, and it's something that I'm sure that the folks that you've gotten to represent you here and help you go through this process will look at. So I just wanted to be sure that everybody understood it's not quite as simple as putting your finger on a map and saying, here's a good spot, let's put all manufacturing at that spot or this spot over here.
And I'll also add on to that it doesn't have to just be the responsibility of the county to figure out how that gets paid for, because it's not a cheap process. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for all of these studies, maybe millions, especially if improvements need to be made. And I will say that it's great that, there are a number of partners that are willing to help kind of fund some of this as well. So, the utility partners, Duke Energy is very aggressive when it comes to site preparedness. Rail lines are also very intrigued because they want to help develop property, because if they can develop property, they get new customers and their load goes up or their number of trains increases. So it's good. The State Department of Commerce, they have money that's available as well to help offset some of these costs. So it's good to know that it's not something that has to be figured out by the counties alone, but the partners can really help to kind of cover those costs.
Yeah, we do have a program that's all of the funding in that program goes directly toward these kinds of things, product development enhancement. All the monies that are dedicated to that fund that come to us from the General Assembly go into that, so we can basically help communities and counties get to the point where they can get some of this work done, because it is expensive, but it's got to be done.
I'll just add that in a county that's growing as fast as yours, you need to be very proactive, based on some of the things that Maceo was saying that we all know in this business. You can't wait for a landowner to say, hey, I've got some land, I'd like to have it available for industrial use. In addition to the zoning kind of needs to go hand in hand with the criteria that industry uses to make a decision. Has to have rail, has to have natural gas, has to have highway access, has to have water and sewer. And so the county, in looking at what land needs to be zoned for industrial, needs to look at all that infrastructure and make sure that what is zoned is in the right place and suits all of the site selection criteria for the companies that are looking, like we were talking about.
Well, and if it's missing one of those items, let's just say that it's a great property, but it's missing water and wastewater, the question then becomes, what's the cost to get it there, number one, and what's the time frame to get it there? So those are the two things that generally jump in the pot. Not to mention, does the city have enough excess capacity to handle something that's 600,000 gallons of wastewater a day or 800,000 gallons of wastewater a day? I think you have a hand in the back, Jason.
Sir, any late questions now, or?
Yeah, we can go ahead and move into that. Yes, we don't run out of time.
Sure, I just have one real quick. It's really interesting what Mr. Nance is saying. In terms of Indian land, where there are housing developments going up all over the place, are we to assume therefore that those properties, Indian land generally, that's failed to meet the qualifications you would normally consider for industrial development? Because, like I say, there seems every few weeks some new development, housing development, which, you know, the uninitiated individual would say, my gosh, they could run that into some industrial use, particularly since they are near that 165-21 corridor. But is that, or are we just not jumping on the zone?
Somebody repeat the question, either go ahead or I can.
I think we got it.
Well,
Just repeat it so people that maybe didn't hear it.
yeah, I think the question there is there's a lot of, I won't say a lot, there's some vacant properties in and around Indian land that could have been used for other things, but it appears as though that there continue to be more and more residential developments taking root there rather than anything else. Let me respond to that as from Congress's standpoint, okay? And I'll leave any further comments to the rest of these gentlemen or lady. Like I said earlier, we have an inventory of industrial sites that have been provided to us by the counties. All 46 counties submit their sites. They can actually put them on themselves. A property owner can actually put a site on themselves. So the 17 sites that I talked about are the properties that we have on file that we know about. We don't select where they are. We don't select what they are. If the county says, yes, we want this to be part of our site inventory, we add it.
Well, so that's a state.
We add it. So, you know, if that, otherwise we would never know about it. We don't have the boots on the ground that go to every county and start trooping around trying to see if we can find some industrial sites. I wish that we could do that. In some cases, I think it would be really beneficial, but no, we sort of leave that up to the county. They know They know where the properties are. They know what can be served as far as water and wastewater is concerned. They know where it will be a conflict with the residents. They know where it will be a conflict with rail. A lot of the projects that you get require rail. So those are things that we take in as part of the inventory. So if we don't know about the property, obviously it's not something that we would submit.
I'd like to ask the question back to you to make sure I understood correctly. Were you asking also if because of all residential development, does that make those industrial sites useless? Is that sort of what you were?
Well, and actually, let me,
the residential?
if I can just clarify, I don't clarify for you, but it sounded like you were saying, is there a missed opportunity because there's this residential development? Was there maybe something wrong with it that couldn't have been industrial? And really, I mean, what I think that it comes down to is that it could have been possibly maybe a great site for industrial property, but it comes down to opportunity. If the county doesn't own and control it, then the developer or the owners of it are gonna, use it for their own personal highest and best use, which around here is probably gonna be residential. So, I mean, you see that in York County where, there's sites, there's acres, there's hundreds of acres that will be perfect for, some large industrial project. And if the county doesn't move quick enough, the developer's gonna snatch it up and turn it into residential because that's where they're gonna make their money. So, I mean, those residential projects, they could be on ideal industrial sites, but it just comes down to opportunity.
But you need to remember that the landowner is also trying to maximize the return. And
I'm not questioning their
the landowner, and we've seen it over and over and over again, way more valuable when it's sold to a residential developer than it is.
But then you also,
an individual landowner.
and that's the issue in York County now, though, where I think I heard something where, if the house isn't worth $425,000, then you're not gonna get enough money back in taxes to cover the services. So that's why there's moratoriums, that's why there's, halts on building residential, because the growth, it's growing so quickly, and growing in parts that aren't developed, that you now have to have all these services to meet their needs, and if the property taxes aren't gonna be high enough, then, and again, how do you counter that? You get manufacturers, you get very large property tax payers, and that's one way to kind of keep it balanced.
And I will add, this way county and area needs balance. Just met with a gentleman last week, lives in California, regulations are killing his manufacturing business, he's coming for sure to Lancaster. We drove up to the Panhandle, close to Charlotte. I think my wife might like living around here. I think I could live out of the schools. What's the land? What was the dirt cost on the few pieces of property that's left? We went through that process. Next thing you know, he's more interested down here from what he's willing to pay for. He wants 26 acres for his business. That's just one simple thing. The balance is key because not everyone is going to live around the courthouse here or in the area that they live or work around here, and they care about schools, and whether it's in Charlotte or outside of Charlotte or in Lancaster. So balance, I think, is really key to having inventory of some type of many different categories available when people are looking.
I have a question. Please go ahead.
There's a lot of information about how you do business and how the county is doing business and the state is doing business. Does it ever come up that a company, an entity that looks like, so this is Indian land, or is it Fort Mill, or is there a town here? There's a Van Wyck, or what do you call yourselves? Is that ever come up as a question, as a problem?
So, perfect example, the gentleman from California, I spent 2.5 hours with him and was as direct and honest as I'm an honest person. I said, Rock Hill, he's looking at Fort Mill too. He's looking at Lancaster and Fort Mill. So you can't go wrong either way. They're outside of Charlotte, they're doing well, they're growing. Some have some upsides, some have some downsides. He asked, how about the taxes? How about the schools? Where do we live? I can still go to the Carolina Panther game from both of those. And you got traffic to 77, which could be a little frustrating down here our neck of the woods is not as bad yet. So yes, they absolutely, at that level of somebody who owns a company is willing to move 32 employees and his family, his daughter, son, and their families to this region. They ask a bunch of questions about town, taxes, unincorporated, incorporated, and quality of life issues too.
But is it ever an issue that we're unincorporated, but we're this place called this? Well, maybe this doesn't get that deep.
For this one, most of mine, at the end of the day, the gentleman wants to find land he can afford to relocate his business and enjoy his life as best he can. And the dirt and the opportunity of where he's got the workforce he's bringing. So in that case, you know.
Yeah, I've heard there's confusion sometimes, and you have to explain what we're talking about. But I don't think it's ever been enough where it's actually been a factor in the decision. But it's always one of the, like, they might scratch your head and ask, why is it this way, or why is it called Fort Mill if it's not really, like, where am I? But again, I mean, you can explain those away, and once they understand that, they get it, so.
I'll go a step further and be a little bit more direct. At the right answer to your question, most companies don't care.
That's right.
They just don't care. It doesn't matter what the town name is or what the community's name is or anything else. It's where can I go to help to be sure that my business is going to be the most successful?
They're gonna call it Charlotte.
Yeah.
They're not even gonna call it like yes or no. They're gonna say, we're going to Charlotte.
As long as I can get the number of employees that I need to get here, I don't care what you call it. It doesn't matter.
You'll notice there's not even county lines on a Google map.
Hi everybody, I'm Ashley Davis. I'm a senior planner for the planning department. But to go back to the earlier question on residential versus industrial sites, what we've seen a lot, at least the planning side of things, is what you've heard here is that a lot of industrial sites want site ready, wastewater, sewer, everything's already kind of in place, it's shovel ready, they move in. Residential developers, on the other hand, at least that we've seen, are more willing to spend money. So example, Roseland, that's going in on 521, that you pass coming down here, if you came from the Indian Land area, is doing a 5 or 6 mile sewer extension. I don't know that we've had any industrial sites or industrial partners recently that have been interested in doing a 6 mile sewer extension. If they don't have to, they're not going to, whereas the residential developers are, that's why you're seeing more residential development in Indiana. So I hope that answers your question.
And it's all about return on investment.
Yes.
Period.
May I? Yes. Hi, Melvin Strobel, Lancaster County School Board of Trustees. I don't claim to be an economist, but I think there's 4 basic legs to the school when we talk about economic development. Infrastructure, which includes buildings, utilities, and transportation. Workforce, which I'm going to come back to. So that's the second leg. The third leg is taxes, and our fourth leg is regulations and safety. Okay, so I want to speak specifically to workforce. As a school board member, I was a little surprised when the first slides came up and it talked about USC, Lancaster, and others being intricately involved in the development, economic development of Lancaster County. Lancaster County School District is the largest employer right now with over 2,200 employees in Lancaster. Imagine us closing our schools down and what that would do to the economy in Lancaster. Secondly, Lancaster is tied, school district is tied to workforce recruitment. I heard several folks say, including our interim economic director, say, when folks come to Lancaster, one of the questions they ask is, how's your school? And they're not talking about the university. They're not talking about Yorktown. They're talking about Lancaster County School Districts. Because if they're going to recruit talent that we can't provide here in Lancaster, they're going to be bringing those young families in, and that's what families are going to be asking about. How are you going to educate my children? Secondly, is Lancaster School District, we need to develop a closer relationship with economic development and our business partners. We have a responsibility to prepare the students for the workforce. It's more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic now. Do these kids coming in have the behavior and attitude to be in the workforce? Or does the employer, now that we've graduated them, have got to spend another 10 years trying to educate them on how to be a better employee, show up on time? And so, for me, I think, Dennis, we really need to have businesses come in and work with our school system and HR people and say, here's what we're looking for. And here's what we need you to help develop for those kids who may not have a desire to go to college. And we're talking about career and technical readiness. And we have a CAPE program. I was hoping Ashley could pull that up for me. We have a CAPE program here at Lancaster, our Career and Technology Education Center, right down the road, where we do building construction, welding, that's on the top, welders. We do licensing, both cosmetology, nursing, fire department, law enforcement. We have one of the top culinary courses here in Lancaster. Those are hidden jewels, gems in this county that no one talks about. But we've got to start promoting that. What we're doing great here in Lancaster with our students. And so I just wanted to stand and say, it doesn't matter. You can have the best infrastructure. You can have a water sewer running there, you can have ready pads, but if they can't find the workforce to support their business, they're not going to come. We saw that in Fairfield when we bought Mack Trucking, and we had to educate, set up a technical school just to educate folks to get technical skills to build engines for Mack Truck. So we don't need to repeat those same mistakes. We need to start focusing. Some things have got to run parallel. And that is, we've got to not only start getting the land and infrastructure ready, but we also have got to make sure that our school system understand fully what the staffing needs are for these businesses we're bringing in, what they're going to be looking for technically, what aptitudes are they going to be expecting, and the competencies. And we need to make sure our kids are ready for that. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
If I may add to that, I don't disagree with you at all. There are several initiatives underway now. Be Pro, Be Proud is probably the one that stands out the most here. It's basically a tractor trailer truck that has been, let's just say, dressed to look like the inside of a manufacturing facility. It gives the students hands-on opportunities to just sort of work the machinery. There's somebody there that teaches them how to do it. And quite honestly, it really fits today's kids because it really looks a lot like a video game. Okay? CAD drawings and that sort of thing look a lot like a video game. So it's set up to do that. It travels around the state. It's a little bit difficult to book because we only have one. We probably need 5. But if you ever see it, you can't miss it because it's as big as that wall back there, and it's got the name all sprawled on the side of it. But it's just for situations like that to be able to take that truck to a school, let it stay there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is, where the students can actually see what's going on rather than listening to a guidance counselor trying to tell them what's going on. And that in itself I think is going to be a benefit. But you're right, we have to find a way to turn that corner.
Another question.
My name is Bill Lee, I'm with the Planning Commission, and my question, not only right now are we doing a comprehensive plan rewrite, we're also doing a development ordinance rewrite. When we look at a development ordinance and how that can be or cannot be attractive to the business community and bringing in further, whether it's industrial or office jobs, what are the types of things that are maybe either non-starters or items that are in a development ordinance that might prevent the business from wanting to relocate to the area?
I can answer that real fast. Special use permits and conditional use permits.
And I mean, just to piggyback on that, and just the speed of permitting and the regulatory environment, if those are items that can be, expedited, as James was saying, companies that are leaving California, we were talking to some companies out of California, and if we tell them that, zoning might take 45 to 60 days, they're floored by that. They expect months, maybe a year out in California for the same thing. So, understanding that it's all relative, and it's hard to know when you're in an environment that does it well, if there's, you're critical of it because, you don't understand how bad some of your competition does it. But, I would stress that South Carolina is known, I believe it's ranked probably third for business climate, regulatory, speed of permitting. That's probably going to be, and that's just saying, if you can issue those and if you can issue them quickly, that can separate you from the competition.
In addition, just more clearly defining what's required. If you have to have those conditions in some way, shape, or form, then just know what they are up front so that when the company brings their application, they know that they've answered all the questions.
But you can, I just want to be clear, an organization or a leadership or a council, you can absolutely affect the way it goes. My example is, 15 years ago, I ran the manufacturing alliance at the Charlotte Chamber. So I represented 150 Mecklenburg County manufacturers, like Lance Crackers and Valspar, and none of them are almost there anymore. And they did that on purpose. Mecklenburg County made a decision to make it really difficult on manufacturers to be in Mecklenburg County. They wanted to go other white collar jobs and whatever reason. And they did it. We're all benefiting, by the way, everybody outside of Charlotte, while the manufacturing, people that want to come south. I've been a North Carolina guy most of my life, and I will say it's been a breath of fresh air for South Carolina in terms of pro-business, pro-zoning, never perfect, but so that's been a wonderful thing that I found here.
Yes.
Yes, I have two questions. Has the county identified any sites for big box stores? Costco, Target, as a development itself?
We haven't, as a county, we do have zoning right now, criteria that will allow that. So in that regard, yes, you can look at different zoning areas or regional business where we can allow that. So yeah, you can look on our zoning map and see where it might go. But also just work with developers in their individual plans and see if they want to incorporate that in. So we do have opportunities for more big boxes in the county.
Is the county courting any of those companies currently?
You won't see county as involved in retail recruitment, but yes, we've encouraged that, and I will hazard to say within 3 weeks, you might hear an announcement about a big box coming to Lancaster County.
I'll answer that from down here.
What?
In the Panhandle or this area?
Along 521.
Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And my second question is, mentioning earlier that, is it the state who identifies sites that they want to develop for industrial manufacturing? Who identifies these sites?
No.
Counties?
Who leads the county?
The county submit sites to us. So the county submits sites that they have that are available for industrial purposes to the state. And we basically take that information and promote it as sites in that particular county.
You'll see within the county website, our county economic development website, we list different sites that are available. And so then the states will pick up on that too and share that to a larger audience.
And then, like you were mentioning, really the demand from developers now is residential. Because it's much faster to build out the industrial with all the diligence, counties have to do with these identified sites. So as time goes on, and everybody's going to get more residential developers, want to continue building. Does a county continue to hold back those identified industrial sites as time goes on? Or do some of these sites just become residential after?
Let me try to respond to that, but if I can. This goes back to the same thing that I said earlier. The county really only owns properties that are currently industrial parks. They do not own properties that are freestanding. Those are held by private individuals. So consequently, the county has no say-so in what those private individuals do with it. They can sell it to anybody they want to sell it to. It doesn't matter whether it's a developer or whether it's a 7-Eleven. So it's not a matter of, as long as the business meets the criteria that is set in place from the zoning standpoint, or agrees and is in harmony with the comprehensive plan, doesn't matter.
I'll say one thing is that from a planning perspective, because industrial value per acre that contributes to the tax base is so much higher than residential value, and it contributes to pay for the costs of schools and infrastructure that residential use in a much higher way. One of the things that the whole purpose of zoning is to make sure that you have the right percentage of each land use, to make sure that things are paid for properly and that you have jobs for the people that live here. So it's a little more difficult in a suburban area like this because those jobs and those things might be in other places besides your county. But most counties, that's the purpose of zoning, is to make sure you've got enough land in each category to provide what you need.
And it really comes down to also, I would say, the goals and the ability for the county to kind of stick to the plan. I mean, if you look where GT Tire went in Chester County, I mean, that was a site, I think I heard that it existed for 20 years, and they had opportunities to kind of come and look at it, and maybe they wanted to divide it up. And the county said, no, we have a plan for this. You want a single user, you want a large manufacturer, and we'll just wait. And they were able to because they didn't pay off when they needed it to. But you have to be able to kind of talk to your constituents and say, we're going to own this property, and it might take 20 years to sell, and it just comes down to the resolve of the administration to be able to wait until those opportunities are right.
Okay, thank you. Are we actively trying to talk to private landowners to negotiate the sale of their land so we can do things for the county?
Yes. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so I do certainly, a lot of people contact our office to find out honestly what's going on in the market. The brokers told them one thing, that think about this. They have a horizon, it's a 5-year, 1 year. I get that call all the time from people. They could be out of state as well. They own 25 acres by the airport. What's going on? What does the county want to see happen?
Well,
That's what they ask me.
I enjoy great food. Yeah.
So you want more restaurants?
I do.
Okay.
I love Indian Land, don't get me wrong, but I tell you sometimes when the South End, and you know, you want something just a little bit closer. And, the South End of Lancaster County actually has a lot of promise, but nobody's coming out there to do anything about it. So what can we do to get more out there?
So, yeah, I heard what Dennis said, and I thought that was wonderful, because I am a huge believer that a center city of almost anywhere you go is really important for the vibrancy and the want to come, which works on workforce, which works on, just having a cool place to be, and a nice place to be, a place to go, shop, eat. People do ask. I mean, the gentleman that's coming from California was asking, and Valentine is attracted to him in terms of amenities, right? But as we talked about, the dirt prices for his 26 acres, he's going to be down here. So it's a balance, and I'm glad. I don't think you can ever stop working on that. And I've noticed that I've been here 3 months, so I agree with you. I would love to see some more development.
I talked to a restaurateur and asked him what would it take for him to come to Lancaster County. And he actually told me that he actually came down the South 200 area, looked at the land, and, talked to some people. But he said that the private owners want too much for the land, because they want to purchase the land, not lease it. That's why I was asking, are we actively doing anything for the county to be able to purchase the land from the landowner for the county? And that way the county can decide what they want to do.
And I don't want to speak on behalf of the county, but I would say that's something that you might run into as an issue down there. Our job, another name for our job is site selection, because there's companies out there that are trying to select their ideal site, but that process becomes site elimination. And one of the first questions, people look at is, do you have an interstate? And if you don't have an interstate, then you just get ruled out, you don't even know that you're part of the process to begin with. So, and then as you get farther into the southern part of the county, it's even further away from the interstate. So, you might, to be able to assemble land and to hold on to land in that part of the county might just be more difficult because, it's, already from an industrial standpoint, it has a drawback of not having that connectedness. And that just comes out on paper. I mean, yes, you just shoot down Highway 9 and then you can be at 77. But if it's a yes or no question, I mean, then, it can be difficult to.
It's pretty simple. Retail follows rooftops, and rooftops follow jobs.
True. But I'd also, I'm married, Melanie, and I'm Robin Spinks' partner, and I do retail recruitment. So forgive me, I'm not turning back. So if I can, I'm going to speak for a second. Retail also has its own criteria. Any chain that you're talking to, even if it's a chain of 3 regional restaurants that might be even, 5-star, 4-star, whatever, they have a list of requirements. And those requirements usually have to do with residential area, service area, population, age, income, and then they find an area they like, and then they start looking at the actual site. The site is usually for a fast food organization. They want it mapped out, ready to go, just like every other industry does. And then you have to have the willing landowner who's willing to pay for all the design, because no one is helping anyone with a corner lot at a stoplight. There's not a lot of money out there to help them do all that engineering. They're putting that out there. And then they wait 5 years to find the numbers come together. But we had a situation in a community where everybody wanted a Target. Target would not come. And so Robin called them. And he said, well, you haven't met my criteria yet. She said, what's the criteria? He said, I go to the Walmart and I see how many car seats are in there, and I count them every once in a while. When you hit my number, we will come. So when you get the population number, the income number, the density, what the traffic counts, when you get those numbers, you're going to be wrapped up with them. But it is a process, and it just doesn't happen. And it's very hard to convince anyone in a chain, a franchisee, to go out on his own and break the protocol of the restaurant or the big box or whoever it might be. Hay and Douglas. Hay and Douglas love the community, that's where it is, but Hay and Douglas don't make their money on lunches. They make their monies on dinner. So if you don't have enough population that are young enough to go and take the kids out, then you may have a large population with great site with wonderful, density and income, but if you don't have that ratio of individuals that meet their criteria, they won't come in.
Thank you. Next one is.
Hey, if I may, one of the things that this like to remind folks on is that Indian land, I'm speaking specifically about Indian land. Indian land historically has been identified as a bedroom community of Charlotte. For years, we have just approved residential development. That's where we are. And for a manufacturer to come into the Indian land area, one, he's competing with real estate development on that pricing. The other part of that too is what adds to the complexity of manufacturers coming in is the type of manufacturing. Because when you have that type of population density, then we're going to have the NIMBYs and the DIMBYs, not in my backyard, or this is my backyard, opposing that manufacturer. Because if the emissions are not what we want, and we just had the issue with the paper mill, and the smell coming from that into the Indian land area, and folks should know that Indian land was in an uproar with the regulatory agency, DAC, and had several meetings. So it depends on the type of industry. We can't just open the doors to everything because we are so densely populated with residences right now that we've got to understand that not everybody can come in. And then those companies, chemical companies, require a lot of buffer, 300 acres or so around their plants in order to try to keep those issues at a minimum. So those are things that I just want to make sure folks were understanding. And the other part of that too is the school system filling. We are, when I just said that we're 2,200 plus employees, we're growing in employees because Indian land is growing. I mean, I have to add more staff, more teachers. And so we're going to continue to be the largest employer because we can't keep up with the growth. And the problem we're having, just like everyone else, where's we going to build the next schools? In the Indian land area. That's the problem. Thank you.
All right, we're getting close to our time here. Do any of the panelists, do you have any more comments, thoughts, any last words? All right. Well,
if I could close with one comment here. To be successful in the economic development arena, you must be prepared. You've got to be ready. And what it takes to be ready is a lot of work, but you've got to be ready if you're going to be competitive and be successful.
All right, well, before we close, one more plug. We have two more of these coming up on October the 13th and October the 27th. Land use will be the first one, growth management, and then transportation. I'm sure everybody's interested in that. But once again, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you on the 13th and the 27th. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.